Good evening. It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call this meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council to order. This is a regular meeting for September the 19th, 2023. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
Councilors Chandler,
Present.
Shada, Wolf,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Weatherholt,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Fortune,
Present.
and Mayor Graham.
Present. Thank you.
We have a quorum with everyone.
Okay, great. Everybody showed up to work. That's a good sign. Okay. Next item is approval of the agenda, which has been in the council packet. I would like to call a couple things to council's attention. First, item G4, discussion of the housing board's inclusory zoning summary. The presenters are unable to attend. I think an illness was involved on the part of the primary presenter. So they've asked that this be continued to at some point in the future. This is not really a timely issue, so I don't see any harm in postponing it. The other item is business items G2 and G3. The first deals with the land use ordinance update, and then the second is the 6 months check-in. They were just sort of arbitrarily placed in that order on the agenda. I think it would make more sense to do the 6 month check-in first and then consider the ordinance after that. So I would suggest that we transpose items 2 and 3. So I would have those two suggestions to amend the agenda as presented. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Okay, a second.
Second.
Okay, great. Thanks. Let's go ahead and vote. No, that's okay. Okay.
If you tried to vote before I was ready, you'll vote again.
Okay, you need to clear
I-
and then have us
Oh.
revote.
They're all in. Okay. Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Thank you. All righty. Next time, public comment on non-agenda items. This is the time when anyone in the audience can speak to an item that is not on the agenda for up to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone wishing to speak to a non-agenda item? Great, thank you. Okay, Susan Presti. Sue, you have 3 minutes. If you'll give us your name and address, please, and just be advised, we don't typically respond to comments, but you filled out the form, so we have your contact information. Thank you. Oh, and if you'll position the microphone about 3 inches from your mouth.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Graham, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. Susan Presti, and I live at 114 Cave Avenue. And I just wanted to say a big thank you to the city staff for their support of the Pikes Peak Ascent and Marathon. Those world-class events require huge logistical support, and our city staff really rose to the occasion and, as usual, provided great support, logistical support to those events. So I just want to thank them and congratulate them on getting through another year of that particular event. And really quickly, just wanted to remind City Council that this weekend is Manitou Springs High School's homecoming. So there will be a homecoming parade at 1:30 through downtown Manitou on Friday. And then in the evening, the homecoming football game against Prospect Ridge Academy. Hope you all can join us and have a great celebration of Manitou Springs High School's homecoming. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment interest? Any other interest in public comment? Yes, not. Okay, let's move along. Then next item is the consent calendar. We have 2 items on it. First is the approval of the September 5th, 2023 City Council minutes. The second is presentation of warrants. Council, I would look, if we can take anything off that anybody wants to discuss. If not, I'd look for a motion to approve and accept.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion is second. Any discussion? Okay, let's vote.
I had one missing vote there. Sorry. Try. Let me try that all over again. Let me see if it was me. Okay, I'll let. Very good. Motion carries unanimously.
And thank you. Technology is our friend.
When I know how to work it.
Well, we're all challenged at times. Okay, great. So consent calendar passes. Next item, business G1, a public hearing on the water treatment plant improvements. Denise, do you want to do the, Roy, you going to do the introductions?
Yes, I'd like to ask Jason Meyer from GMS to come up, who will do the presentation tonight.
Thank you, City Council, and can you hear me?
Mr. Meyer, if you would give us your name and
Oh,
your
yes.
title and affiliation. And then if you could be about 3 inches away from the microphone, that's good. There are people at home watching you.
Got it. No pressure at all, right?
No, huh? You always wanted to be a TV star.
That's
This is
right.
it.
All right, so my name is Jason Meyer, principal with GMS Consulting Engineers. And we've been working with city staff specifically on the city's water treatment plant. And tonight it's this public hearing is specific for the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. And I don't know, do you guys get the presentation on your laptops?
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be using those slides quite a bit. So if you want to go to the next slide. So I don't know how much you guys know about your drinking water or where your water plant is, but it's about a mile west of town, actually just kind of up the hill from the water tank you can see. It's been or was installed in 1983, so it's been in service for quite a few years. Not a lot of changes to it since that time. Overall, your water comes from 2 different water sources, both of which are surface water. So the plant's set up for treatment of surface water. And that includes pre-sedimentation. There's some pre-chlorination, a polymer filtration. You can adjust pH and then a disinfection, and then it comes out to the city. Right now, that plant is set up with 3 individual treatment units. And each one of those units can treat up to 1 million gallons a day. So a total of 3 million gallons a day that you can actually make or create drinking water through your plant. Next slide. So the question becomes, well, why do we need to be doing anything? Over the last several decades, there's a bunch of the equipment within the facility that actually date back to the original construction. So it's actually performed quite well, especially when you have pumps lasting 40 years. In addition to that, there's a lot of limited automation within the facility that wasn't constructed from the first day. So from an operational standpoint, it gives city staff some challenges. They have to be on site with regularity, addressing any issues or making changes. So it's much more man intensive than what it could be. In addition to that, like I said earlier, a lot of the equipment dates back to 1983. So it's starting to hit that point of its useful life where it's starting to need to be replaced. In addition to that, what we're getting feedback from city staff is they'd really like to have some flexibility on how they can operate this plant because it is fairly limited. And with that limitation, you actually have to have someone up there full time to run and operate the facility. So based on that, 9 tasks have been identified to be addressed within the water treatment plant. Next slide. So out of those, task number one is focused on kind of the controls of the facility, and it deals with soda ash, which is you're starting to adjust the pH with that. Influent and effluent valving. So more on how you control and how the operator can read all the logistics coming out of it. Filter control, that's probably one of the bigger pieces that has a lot of limitations to it. Backwash pond recovery pumps, sample lines within the plant itself, and SCADA controls. So those are the components that the operators are using to control the plant. That's task number one. Task number two deals with the ability of the filter units to actually discharge back to these backwash ponds. Right now, it's very limited in doing that. So that would create some piping and valving to actually backwash and put that backwash water directly to those ponds. Task number three is specific to the third treatment unit. The city has already addressed the first two treatment units. And what I mean by that is replacing the filter media within it and recoating the insides of those filter units. That same process needs to happen on the third train. In the fourth, in addition to that, there's some piping, internal piping to that. Once the old units have been taken down, or the first two units, they've noticed that a lot of the parts and pieces need to be replaced. We're assuming that same thing would need to be addressed within this third treatment unit. Task number four. So the way these treatment units are set up, there's two different filter processes in it. The first one is called the clarifier. So right now you do not, or the plant doesn't have the ability to back flush the clarifier and the filter at the independently. So this process would be looking at being able to take the clarifier, backwash that independent of the other filter process, to again give the staff the ability to actually operate the plant in a more efficient and effective manner and generating clean water. And tasks, and those first four tasks are the high priority tasks if you were to prioritize these out. Task number five deals with the heating and ventilation within the facility. Task six is the clear well and making sure that the disinfection contact time is being addressed to meet state regulations. Task seven is the SCADA, so the control, a lot of the controls within the facility. Task eight is the clear well, or the clear well pumps, replacing those pumps. Those, like I mentioned earlier, those pumps date back to the original 1983 installation. And task nine is to replace the door going into the chlorine room. That is deteriorated with time and needs to be addressed. And I will pause if anyone has questions or anything, let me know. I'm more than happy to stop and address those as we go through. Are there any questions up to this point?
Doesn't appear so.
Great. Next slide. So as I had addressed earlier, really the main purpose of this is to be a benefit of overall for the protection of public health. And in that really gives the ability of city staff to operate this facility much more efficiently and effectively. Going back through and doing a cost estimate on these needed improvements, those sit right above or right under 3.2 million. So it's $3,162,000. And that goes from soft costs. So whether that's engineering, attorneys, advertising, all the way through the construction end of it. And that also includes some contingencies given the inflation that we've seen over the last year. There are those dollars in there to help address those as this moves forward. Next slide. So with that, one of the questions is, well, how do you fund something of this magnitude? So what city staff and GMS has been working together is going through the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority. They have a program called the State Revolving Fund. Specifically for this, it'd be the Drinking Water Revolving Fund. And in late 2021, I don't know, I'm sure you guys have heard of this, but it's the bipartisan infrastructure law, or that they call it the bill funding. There's a chunk of money that's coming to each state for both water projects and sewer projects. And right now the city actually sits real well to qualify for these funds. So what that means is you can get up to $5 million in what they call loan forgiveness, which is a nice term for grant, and that goes more back to Tabor requirements. Getting around, or not getting around, but not having to go through a bunch of the Tabor requirements. So that would put you up to a total project of 10 million, because they forgive half of the total loan request. So you could go all the way up to 10 million. But in this case, right now, we're looking at the 3,162,000. So splitting that in half, 581,000, excuse me, would come in the form of loan, and 1,581,000 would come in the form of loan forgiveness, which is another term for grant. Questions on that? Yes.
Just you said we're sitting well to get this loan forgiveness, correct?
Yes, so we've actually already put in, they call it a pre-qualification application. City's already gone through that. They've gone through the process, and both the health department, who is kind of the overseer of it, whereas Water and Power, they're the bank in this scenario. They've already stated to city staff that the city does qualify for the bill funds. So yes, they do.
So we qualify. Is there competition for the funds as
Yes,
well?
very much so.
And where would you say, I'm assuming we're over 50% chance, but are we up to 90% chance or 60% chance, or do you have any sense of where we stand there?
Great question. And it is always a function of who is applying at what point in time. And that one, I can't tell you. I don't know. That said, though, there is competition. What has happened in the last 2 years, I don't know if you've heard of the congressional designated spending dollars. That's another, more dollars coming from requests directly to the senators or House members. So whether it's the Senate or the House, I think in our area, our House member probably does not accept requests. So it's mainly the two state senators or federal senators. We'll take in requests for federal funding. And in that request, specifically for water and wastewater projects, what has happened, they've taken those dollars out of the state revolving fund going to all of the states. So we're starting to see a significant impact on what historically has come into the state through the revolving fund. So they're having a big impact mainly on the smaller communities. So what may happen with this program going forward, depending on how big of an impact it does have, these bill dollars may get pushed specifically to what they call disadvantaged communities. If that happens, Manitou will not qualify for them anymore. But as of today, through the end of this year, from what we can tell, you still qualify and everything's good to go. Questions on that?
So what's the process here in terms of when the grant is reviewed and approved
Great question.
or not?
So the way the process works, it's a very defined program. First piece is what they call the pre-qualification application. That's already been submitted by city staff and done and approved. The next step is what they call the project needs assessment. That was submitted in August. Once that is back, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment will come back and give their review of that document. And as soon as there's approval on that, that gives the city the ability to go ahead and apply for the funds. In addition to that, you also have to submit the plans and specifications along with that loan application. And there's 8 dates throughout the year that you're allowed to actually apply for those funds. So right now there's 2 dates left. It's October 15th and November 15th. Once you kick over into the new year, and I'm not going to remember all the dates, but it's like January, March, April, June, August, October, and November. I could be off on those, so don't quote me on any of those. But I know for sure for this year, it's October and November 15th. Once we go into next year, it actually backs out to the 5th of the month.
So are we going to make either one of those 2 dates?
Great question. Yes, we are right now programmed to make the October 15th deadline date.
Mayor, may I speak?
Yeah, please, Denise.
Yeah, we've been pushing really hard to make the October 15th due to the changes that's been happening to this funding. We don't want to delay this. We really want to move quickly and because that 1.5 million forgiveness is important for our community as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. I imagine part of the competitive criteria is how thorough the application is. I would imagine, I mean, this was, your P&A is, I think it was 182 pages of our packet, an incredibly thorough document. So is this pretty status quo?
It is.
It looks like we've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's prior to getting this through. So I would wondering if that the P&A itself gives us a leg up.
It won't, because every community has to get approval. So if some communities don't provide a thorough document, they won't be able to apply. So a lot of it, the bigger piece is how quick can you get through their process? So as of right now, having the P&A in, all we need is that approval letter from the health department to move forward with the application piece, along with the plans and specs. And everything's programmed for that October 15th deadline date. Some other communities we worked with, we've gotten that approval letter literally the day before. So from our perspective, we're full steam ahead for that October 15th deadline, and we're going to be submitting that stuff regardless. So once the approval comes in, they already have the information. So worst case is, let's say it comes in after that October 15th and it's in November. Our documents are already in there. They're already in the queue, so to speak, and we should be good to go. So any way you look at it, we'll be ready. It's just waiting for the health department to catch up to us. Yes.
And then is the revolving fund a guaranteed amount? We just apply for it and we get the revolving fund?
Historically, yes. I think in my knowledge, there has not been any community that's gotten to that point that has said or denied the request. So from everything I can tell, yes, that it's a green light. Other questions?
Other questions, council? I guess not. If you want to go ahead and continue.
Great questions. Usually I just get the deer in the headlight look, so I appreciate it. Next slide. So this is getting into more of the nitty gritty on the breakdown of what the loan looks like from a rate impact. So I have two columns in this spreadsheet. The first one on the left-hand side is taking into account the bill funding. So that is that loan forgiveness at the 1.5 million. And then on the other side, it's also making or showing what happens if the bill funding for whatever reason falls apart and it has a full loan. So as you walk down the rows in this table, it shows you the breakdown between loan forgiveness and loan dollars. And then this first dollar amount that you come to is the operation and maintenance expenses. And that's taken an average from 20 to 22. And that's broken down on a equivalent tap. And on average, the expense per tap is that $29.70 city cost. So this the next line below that is the debt broken down on that equivalent tap basis. So for the loan or the bill funding, which would include that loan forgiveness, that's $2.28. If it's the full 3.62 million, that's $4.56. And these funds have something very specific required of them, and they call it a coverage ratio, which means that you need to take in 10% greater than that loan amount. And there's a little calculation, but in essence, that's all it really is meaning. So for the bill funding, that would be an additional 23 cents per user or per tap. And without the bill funding, it's 46 cents. The next line below that is the total sum of that O&M plus the debt plus that added 10% coverage ratio. So for the bill funding, that's $32.21. And without the bill funding, it's $34.72. Now, looking at what your current revenues coming in to the water fund, on average, again, on equivalent residential tap, that's coming in at $37.02 per month. So what that means right now with the bill funding, on average, you should be making or bringing in more than $4.81 on average on a monthly basis, on a per tap basis more. And if you didn't get the bill funding, it would be $2.30. So big picture, what this means is you can take this debt on and not have to adjust rates. The funds or your revenues coming in are healthy enough to absorb that piece. And another good news is in 2025, we have a loan that's going to be retiring. So that will help alleviate some more of the pain, so to speak, as you continue to move forward. Questions on any of this? Yeah.
I'm assuming that there'll be additional cost savings too, once the work's complete. And maybe there's less staff time involved and potentially some efficiencies that could result in savings.
There definitely could be, but that is going to be more of a city staff on how that looks and what that looks like. You won't have to have people up there manning the plant 24/7, so to speak, like they do now. It'll be a lot more less labor intensive and a lot easier to operate. But other than that, it's more just replacing equipment that's aging, and that won't have a huge impact on O&M costs.
Nancy, I think Nancy and then Judith.
Thanks. Just the bottom line, I just want to clarify to make sure I understood clearly that we will have enough in our enterprise fund to cover this in either scenario without raising rates.
Correct.
further.
And that's taking the last 3 years and averaging those out. So from 2020 to 2022, both on the expenditure side of the books and on the revenue side. So yes.
So our rate study, didn't we just raise water rates $2?
No, that was the stormwater, and we are doing
Stormwater.
the water and the wastewater study. But we're waiting to see the DOLA grant and seeing what happens here, because that really impacts what happens with the rate case.
Okay, so this is, if we get this is very good news for us.
Yeah, and of course, the DOLA grant was also very good.
Oh,
You know,
yes.
that's $2 million that nobody has to pay for.
Yeah.
That allows us to
Okay,
continue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. So is there any indication on how many service years we would get with doing the $3.162 million worth of upgrades? I mean, are we looking at getting another 40 years? I mean, is that factored into any of the calculations?
I would be shocked if you get another 40 years. Typically what we're seeing in replacement equipment, you're not getting as long of a life as you used to. So one of the things we're going to be looking at on some of the pumps, is it better to rehab the existing pumps and keeping them in service compared to a new? That's something we'll evaluate. That said, you would hope that you would get another 40 years, but more than likely you probably won't.
You answered my question. My second question was, are you doing that, a risk benefit thing on replacement versus rehabbing? So you answered my question. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions at this point? Guess not. Go ahead, please.
All right. Next slide. So one of the things, when you're using the revolving fund, there are various federal pieces that you have to meet. And one of those pieces is the environmental side. And so there needs to be a discussion held on what impacts from an environmental standpoint does the project hold. And this one, it's very, very minimal. Probably your biggest impact is going to be increased traffic going up and down to the water plant. Most of all of the construction, all the activity is going to be inside the building. So that lends itself to not really having that big of an impact in general. So from that standpoint, best management practices will be incorporated where needed. But outside of that, there's not a lot of impacts to be had. Since everything is pretty much confined internally to the water plant itself. Questions on that? All right, next slide. So we kind of batted some of this around, but this is given the overall project schedule. And where we're sitting right now, as I said earlier, the project needs assessment's already been submitted. We're hoping to have the environmental clearance received yet this month. We're looking at that October 15th deadline for both the loan application submittal and the plans and specs. And after that, that will take a couple of months and go to Water and Powers Board in December. And I would assume that you would get full approval with that. After that, it can take anywhere from 2 to 3 months. We can request a quicker review, or with this, with the agreement between the state and the city, it'll probably be 2 months. So once that's in place, then we can actually start the bidding process. And right now we're projecting that bidding process to start in February of next year. Bid opening, and that would then come in March. And we would assume that project, given where we're at budgetarily and what contingencies are already contained within the project, that we should be good to move forward with the project itself. So we would imagine an award in March as well. We would assume construction, once you get the contract shuffled back and forth between the contractor and the city, construction would start in May, and we look at a completion date in September of 2024. Questions on the schedule?
I have a question actually for staff regarding, again, the rate study. I thought we were doing a water rate study. And how does this coincide with that?
Yes, we are, but we're waiting to get the results of this, and we were waiting for the DOLA grant. So that will come back now in 2024
Okay,
instead of 2023.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? I guess just one observation is that we tentatively anticipate doing work on Ruxton Avenue starting, I think it's in November 2024. And that could move, but you know, if we could actually get this done by September, that would be important. It's kind of a minor thing at this point, but
Definitely.
it's never too soon to start worrying. So
Oh,
I'll mention
I would
that.
agree. In
Okay.
construction, you always get thrown a curveball. That seems always to be the
Exactly.
case.
Panic early.
Yes,
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead then.
that's it. That's all I have. So if there's any more questions, I'd be more than happy to address any of those. And
Okay.
I don't know if
Well,
city staff has anything else to add, or if you want.
we are required to have a public hearing as part of this process, and we're going to do that tonight. So I think what might be appropriate then is to open the public hearing, see if that raises any additional questions, and then go ahead and we may have additional questions for you. So
That'd be great.
yeah, if you'd like to have a seat back with the audience, we'll see if we have any public comment here. Thank you. So this is a public hearing. I will go ahead and open this up for public comment. Anyone who would like to speak to this issue is welcome to do so now. Everybody likes to drink water, so it's not really controversial. Judy, did we have any emails or did we receive anything? Okay. As it appears there are no takers, I will close this public comment portion. Council, do we have additional questions that we'd like to ask Mr. Meyer? Or are we pretty well satisfied? City staff, do you have comments or questions?
I'll just say that it's been great working with GMS and Mr. Meyer. They've been real responsive to our needs and with questions, and also keeping us on track and moving forward. So we appreciate all their efforts.
Right, good to hear. Denise?
Yeah, I just want to mention, one of the things that Counselor Chandler asked was regarding how long will this last? And one of the things that we're really working on is a maintenance program. So we don't ever end up where we are right now, where we have millions of dollars that need to be done because they've been deferred. So we're working on that. We're putting that together, and you're seeing that over and over from a fleet management program, a SIP program, and we continue to really look at the maintenance so we don't end up 40 years down or 60 years down and nothing has been done, because that does create crisis.
Good points. Okay. Mr. Parker, you should have the opportunity.
No, I appreciate that. I don't have it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess last call, council. Any further questions or comments? So I believe the real function tonight is we needed to conduct a public hearing as part of the process. And it appears to me that council is pleased with the direction that staff has been taking with us and our consultant. So it would seem to me that the only direction you need is to push on. Mr. Cheney, you had a
Yes, just I need to pick up the sheet, the roster that you were here, if it's at the end, and we'll get that to GMS.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe any vote was required. We just had to conduct the public hearing. Is that correct? Okay. No further action is required. So thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. Our next item of business, and for anyone in the audience who came in late, we voted at the beginning of the meeting to trade the order on items G2 and G3. It makes more sense, I think, to do the land use development code 6-month check-in, see how we're doing, and then we'll visit an ordinance. So Hannah, you'll walk us through this?
Good evening, City Council. Hannah Van Nimwegen with the City Planning Department. If we could pull up the presentation that's associated with the code update, and then we'll flip to the last couple slides and start there. Overall, though, yes, the last slide would be great. Oh, let's start here. This is perfect. So overall, or let me say, congratulations on making it 6 months in with a new code. It definitely has really helped staff in clarifying what we're implementing, how to implement those things. And overall, we think that the new code is working really well. There is no brand new code that is ever perfect. And so that's why we're bringing forward a lot of really just cleanup. We didn't really need to change the intent of any of our code sections at this time. However, we haven't really seen any large development applications come in yet. So a lot of those new codes that are geared towards larger development, we don't have a whole lot of feedback on. But anyway, so we have heard some feedback from the public, and we have heard some feedback from the City Planning Commission. So we'll start with the public. We've heard from some residents that it's a little bit difficult for new residential construction additions to be dark sky compliant. Ultimately, my professional opinion is that the ultimate dark sky compliance is no additional lighting, which has no extra cost. We just have heard that these fixtures that are compliant with our code add a significant cost. That being automatic sensors that sense when it's dusk or dawn, and will turn on the lights or turn off the lights. So in my opinion, I think our code is working fine. Some new residential has been able to meet the code requirement. But just so you know, we have gotten that feedback. We also have gotten some feedback regarding some confusion with our ecological characterization study. We've heard that there's only one firm in the state that is qualified to do these studies. We are currently looking into that just to make sure that that's actually the case. And if it is, we'll come up with some proposed alternatives just to make it more accessible. So we're still looking into that, but just so you know, we have heard that feedback as well. We have gotten a good amount of interest from property owners in variances to building height and density, as well as variances to the parking requirement for lodging downtown. Again, We've heard the sentiments from the code committee, from the city council, from the planning commission, that there's just not interest at this time for variances to these items. And so those variances have not moved forward, as in staff is communicating that there's not really an interest in those items at this time, and the individuals have chosen not to make an application through our department for those topics. Just as a little bit of a joke, no one is particularly happy with our short-term rental regulations. Some think we're too lenient, others think we're too strict. But as our planning commission put it, that means that there is balance. So just so you know, we do hear about short-term rentals pretty frequently still. We are pretty close to our maximum cap for short-term rentals. So if you recall, there is a 2% cap based on the number of dwelling units in town, and we're pretty close to that now. So I imagine that we would be hitting that probably next year. We've also heard that the thresholds for requiring a minor site plan are too low, as in we require them too frequently. I professionally think that it's actually just about right. Minor site plans is the lowest form of development plan, so the most simple. It's required whenever you're making changes to your property of relative significance. So if you're building a fence, a retaining wall, putting on a shed onto your property, building an addition, or building a brand new residence where one is permitted, that all requires a minor site plan. It just helps us keep track with what is actually happening on the ground. And it gives us a avenue to require geologic hazard reports, erosion control plans, and things of that nature. So with the code updates that you will hear next, none of them address these particular items. I just wanted to communicate what we as a department have heard most frequently. If we could go to the slide right before this one. This is the feedback that we've gotten from the City Planning Commission. The City Planning Commission heard this code update earlier this month, and it did get unanimous approval. The version that you have seen does include some adjustments from the City Planning Commission, but overall, this is the feedback that we heard from that meeting. There is some interest from commissioners to make the variance criteria a little more flexible. One of the criteria says that there are no other design alternatives. And by default, a design alternative is to just not build what you're hoping to build. So we did get some direction to look into making those a little bit more flexible. Again, this particular code update does not change the review criteria for variances. So that's something that we're hoping to address in the coming months and take through a separate ordinance. There also was some interest in developing a rebate system to incentivize occupancy of commercial buildings. We did not expect that comment to be made, so we haven't done a whole lot of research on that just yet. However, there does seem to be some examples from other cities where they do have a successful rebate type program that helps incentivize those buildings being occupied. And so that is something that we want to look into a little bit further. But again, this code update that you're hearing does not have any language pertaining to that in it. And so overall, I would say that this feedback is pretty, I don't want to say minor, but it is an acceptable level of feedback. You know, not everybody's going to be perfectly happy with everything. But we think that our new code, as far as the types of applications and development that we have gotten in the last 6 months, it is steering us in the right direction, is my opinion. And so I'm happy to take any questions on any of the feedback that we've gotten so far.
Okay, Judith?
Thank you. Thank you, Hannah. I was just wanting to know if you could expand a little bit on the interest in the variance to building height and density. Is this primarily coming from residences or the development community? What could you just explain that a little bit more in detail to me?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Chandler. Absolutely. So it comes from, I would say, both developers and smaller scale builders. So individuals who maybe own a piece of property that would be acceptable for or is zoned for and is large enough for townhomes or apartments of some kind. However, they're having trouble making the building height work or the density work with the current market conditions. I mean, it's no surprise to anybody to hear that construction costs are very high right now. Property values are high right now. And so everything just costs a little bit more. And so in order to make margins pencil out, often that means taller structures and more dense projects. And so we have gotten those questions from the development community specifically, but not just from like large scale folks. I would say even hobby builders, if there is such a thing. Mhm.
Natalie, did I see you? Raise your hand. Okay. Other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you. Since we have the chair of the planning commission here, I was wondering if he'd like to make any comments. Alan, would you, since you're here, maybe you'd have some insights you'd like to share with us? You don't have to, but if you want to, this would be a good time.
Well, since you called me out, I'll have to oblige. Alan Delwich, 210 Violeta Vista. And my assessment is it's been going really well. I think the code is a lot more readable. And we've just had a lot, I think things have run a lot more smoothly. It's, some of the low hanging fruit is stuff like not having to deal with minimum parking requirements in the downtown. And the major temporary use has been effective. It's given an opportunity for people to do things without having to go through the 3-step process of a major conditional use. So those are my simple observations. Since you caught me off guard, that's about it.
Sorry, I didn't
That's
mean
okay.
to catch you off guard, but I thought, you've looked at these problems for years. It's useful to have your insights on this.
Yeah, well, I think it's going well.
Good. Anybody have questions for Alan? I guess not. Okay, thanks, Alan. Okay. Hannah, did you have anything else that you wanted to present relative to the 6-month check-in?
No, I didn't. I just wanted to communicate that I also think on an administrative level that this is going pretty well. And it's been, there's always a learning curve with a new code, but I think that this is a very positive step forward. But I'm also happy to take any particular direction from council if you want us to expand on any of the feedback in the shorter term.
Council have any comment on that? It would appear that council is also pretty content with what we've got going here. So Judith, you do have something?
I think that's great feedback. It's wonderful. I would be in favor of giving it another 6 months and then seeing where we are and then revisiting this and just give us a calendar year. That's just my thought. Because I think in general, it was, like you said, just about the right amount of feedback, and what a tremendous, amazing accomplishment. So that's my thought, is give it another 6 months and percolate on these issues that have come up.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, this is really informational, so we don't need to take any action on this. So I would suggest we move along to the next agenda item, which is the first reading of ordinance number 1123, an ordinance amending Title 18 to the Manitou Springs Municipal Code. That is the Land Use and Development Code, what we were just talking about. So Hannah, back to you.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Graham. So the series of code updates that, or I wouldn't call them updates, but cleanups that I'm proposing, I feel are minor and technical in nature. Nothing is intended to change the intent of these code sections. But as you begin to use certain code sections, you realize, oh, I probably could have worded that a little bit more clearly, or, oh, that's a rogue comma. We should probably clean that up. And so a lot of the updates that I'm proposing are of that nature. However, we are also proposing to add just a couple of things. So I'm happy to go through the slides. If we can get that pulled up.
Yeah, Nancy has a question.
Just in the red line version, was it the red line, the substantive changes, and the blue line, the more administrative?
That's a great question. So that's just a something I couldn't figure out in Microsoft Word. Those are all changes. Some just came from me and some just came from our city attorney. And so I don't remember which was which. I just couldn't get them to be the same color.
Okay. Oh, Judith?
Maybe it's just me, but in my packet, there's the memo, the city planning commission updates, staff report, the CPC edits and the updates presentation, but I didn't see an actual ordinance.
Oh, I think there should be a draft ordinance
In
in
there?
there.
Okay.
I did prepare one. Yeah.
Yeah, I see an ordinance in there in the packet, so.
Okay, if we can go to the next slide. Chapter 1, really easy. We are not proposing any changes. So chapter 1 is just the general provisions section. This is where we outline general authority, the intent of the zoning code, and how to treat nonconformities. The adjustments that we made between the old code and this one have been working really well, and we didn't feel like we needed to make any adjustments at this time. Next slide. Chapter 2, this is our zone district chapter. So this is where we outline the different zone districts, which includes our new zone district, the mixed use commercial district, and also outlines maximum building heights, minimum lot sizes, setbacks, things of that nature. In this section, we really are just doing some cleanup. So we are spelling out some acronyms that got missed. We are adjusting the language of how we measure building height, but again, the intent is the same. We just had some builders who managed to interpret it a little bit differently. And so we are amending that to make it more clear. We are revising a footnote to make sure that in the commercial and mixed use districts and high density districts that people using the code are also referencing another section that further limits building height. We clarified exceptions to the maximum driveway slope. Again, the second to last amendment in this chapter is that same footnote I just mentioned. And the last amendment is very similar, but I also had to reference a third section. So again, just minor technical cleanup to improve ease of use, essentially. Next slide. Chapter 3, we did not have a whole lot of changes either. Chapter 3 is the section called development standards. That is the section where we regulate architecture and essentially the desired look of Manitou Springs. So landscaping is in there, exterior lighting, parking, fencing, signage, things of that, things along those lines. So the built environment. The first adjustment was a request from the city council to make sure that new commercial structures are also solar ready. In the first draft, we had made sure that new residential structures were, and this is just a quick add-on to include commercial. We renamed floodplain manager to floodplain administrator, just because that is an actual title with the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department, and we just wanted to make sure there was no confusion. We did add a definition for and regulation for inflatable displays. I provided some examples of what that could be. Based on the sign code, regulating these inflatable displays seemed to fit right in. We had gotten a couple of requests for those in the last year or so. And so I just wanted to make sure we had some ruling on them, essentially prohibiting them. Let me just say that. Next slide, please. The last two changes are We clarified when a sign permit was required. Again, that doesn't change the intent because later on in the code, it does say that those things require a permit. We just updated the table. And the last item is we added language to permit murals. Murals have been informally allowed in Manitou Springs, those being art and nature. However, technically speaking, they could be signage. And so we just wanted to make sure that there was some language that would allow us to differentiate those two things. So differentiating art and murals from signage that's painted on a building. Next slide.
Okay, may I ask you something about that last item?
Yeah.
So what does it say about the murals?
Yeah, let me
Just-
pull that section up real quick. Okay. So that section that was added basically says that murals are exempt from size and height limitations and will not be counted towards the maximum number of signs permitted on a property. And we didn't really change the sign code between the last code and this LUDC. That additional language also says the proposed design and placement of the mural shall be included in a sign permit application, again, just so that we have record of it being a mural versus a sign. And it gives the director the authority to approve those permits with a criteria saying the property owner has given written consent. The proposed mural promotes and enhances the aesthetic beauty and character of the city. That the proposed mural is primarily artistic in nature. The proposed mural is a one-of-a-kind work of art and does not appear in any other public form, including but not limited to advertising, logos, trademarks, including publications where the mural is used to promote or identify the sponsor or the business in any way. The last criteria being the proposed mural does not include offensive or illegal images or language.
So you can't use the name of the business was near the end, and near the beginning, it says that you can as long as it's not too big. That sounds confusing.
Thank you, Councilor Wolf, for the opportunity to clarify. This is where we would want the differentiation between a mural and a wall sign. So if it included the business name and was essentially an advertisement for the business in there, it would be regulated through the wall sign section of code, which already exists. We just wanted to create an avenue for somebody who wanted to paint like flowers on the building instead.
So was it like the first paragraph or the second or third sentence you read that says it's okay to put your business name in there as long as it's not too big, or did I misunderstand that?
I can reread it. It says, the very first one that I read off was, mural signs shall be exempt from size and height limitations and not be counted towards the maximum number of signs permitted on a property. Was that the one? I can keep going to.
Okay, now wasn't there a sentence about has to be artistic and don't have it be advertising, but you can have it be a little bit advertising? Wasn't there a sentence like that?
I don't interpret that sentence that way, but I can reread it.
Okay.
So this is one of the review criteria for approval of a sign permit for a mural. And it says, the proposed mural is a one-of-a-kind work of art and does not appear in any other public form, including but not limited to advertising, logos, and trademarks, and including publications where the mural is used to promote or identify the sponsor in any form.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a sentence before that. No?
So I can reread the criteria just to make sure I'm not missing something.
Sorry.
So the very first criteria is the property owner has given written consent. The second criteria is the proposed mural promotes and enhances the aesthetic beauty and character of the city. The third is the proposed mural is primarily artistic in nature. The fourth is the one that I read just a second ago. And the fifth is the proposed mural does not include offensive or illegal images or language.
Oh, I see. So the primarily artistic in nature could mean that it can be 3/4 artistic and 1/4 has the name of my business on it. Would that be allowed?
Well, it would be in violation of the second part of the one criteria I read, because that would be advertising logos or trademarks, which are prohibited in these.
Okay, so in that
items.
case, wouldn't it have to be entirely artistic? Or if it's only partially artistic, what's the other part that you're going to allow? If that's the part that seems
Well, if it includes,
inconsistent to me.
if it includes a business name, a business that's located in the building itself, then it would be a wall sign, which is regulated by a different
But you
section of
said
code.
it can only has to be 3/4 artistic. Why does it say 3/4? What's going to
I
be
can
the
jump
other
in.
25%?
Jeff, if you could help out.
Yeah, no problem. So, honestly, I think this language, the primarily, I got it down here.
Can you get
Lot
about
closer.
3 inches from the mouth?
All
Yeah.
right, keep on forgetting. I think the word primarily is to basically provide some leeway. It's just, like 100% artistic. I don't know, how do you even define artistic, right? I think it was just, the intent of this is for it to be, primarily an artistic type of rendition. We could say it's artistic in nature and get rid of the
Yeah,
word.
to me, the word
primarily.
primarily implies that it's not 100%. So then if it's not 100%, what else are we allowed to put in there?
Yeah, I honestly think it's an impossible question to answer that, but I understand your question, so. we can
So
get-
if we
can
take
get
out
rid
the
of-
word primarily, would you have any heartburn?
No,
And if we take out what was it, 75%? It just has to be artistic, period, right? No advertising.
yeah, I think the word primarily is just, wasn't probably fully
Okay.
considered to be an issue, so.
That'd be my only suggestion, just so we don't get into some headache about it being too subjective.
I guess just to add a little bit of perspective, I think of the, down at the Hiawatha Gardens building, we have those, they're murals, they're not advertising signs. It says where dancing is entrancing, but that's just an old, that's actually taken from an old ad, but it's sort of nobody is going to go in there and dance right now. But we just the intent, I think, was to dress the building up. Down in Memorial Park on the side of the creek there, there's an Iggy Igloo Memorial mural. And up next on the edge of on the alley side of the Green Horse Gallery building, it's probably about a 3 or 4 foot by 5 or 6 foot piece of art that's basically it's mostly a bee and maybe some flowers and stuff. So I guess that we call that a mural and not an advertising sign. So maybe there's a little bit of a matter of taste, but I mean, none of those 3 murals have anything that would be considered advertising a going business.
Yeah, and I'd have to go back and look at the case. There's actually a relatively important case in Colorado where there was a mural on the side of, I think it was like a head shop or something, where they had, I think it was like also an Alice in Wonderland type design on the thing. And there was a whole case on it, and like the court went through certain criteria to determine, whether it was commercial or non-commercial, and there's like different standards that apply. And so I don't know, but the word primarily may have actually come out of that criteria in the case. I don't think it really makes a huge difference. I understand your concern. So, I don't think it's an issue getting rid of the word primarily. So either way.
Julie, did you have anything to follow?
That was my only concern.
Okay,
Thank you so
okay,
much.
great. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Do you have other questions for Hannah?
Okay.
I guess not. Okay, you'll go ahead.
So moving on to chapter 4, this is our use section of code. So this is where we decide what land uses are permitted in what zone districts and the special requirements that may be applicable to each land use. So in that section, we clarify when accessory land uses are permitted in a zone district. But again, not changing intent. It was just worded a little bit funky, so we reworded it a bit. We also remove the individual retail and medical marijuana land uses. So in that table, we had a particular line for medical marijuana and then another line for retail marijuana. However, Chapter 5 of our code requires dual operation. So we just removed those individual land uses and turned them into one for dual operation marijuana land uses. We also fixed that they require a conditional use permit. In the LUDC that was approved, they were permitted by right. However, Chapter 5 requires a conditional use. So we just changed the P to a C in that section. We also altered the definition of multi-household dwelling. And that is to just allow multiple dwellings on one lot. So the intent is the same, where you have multiple units that are for rent on one lot. However, they just don't have to be attached. And that's partially, it's kind of a newer development trend where it's more of a cottage style, but also Manitou Springs has a history of these cottage type motel land uses. And if those were to ever transition into residential, our code wouldn't prohibit them purely because they don't have a shared common wall. So if they were to be platted onto their own individual lots, it would be treated much differently. This is purely to accommodate a for rent product where they're renting out individual cottages instead of attached apartments, essentially.
Julie?
Yeah.
So what's the impact of this definition being altered?
Essentially, we literally just had to remove the part that required a shared common wall, and all else stayed the same.
So this increases the ADUs?
Thank you, Councilor Wolf. No, this does not change the fact that ADUs are not permitted in Manitou Springs, because we did not change the fact that in residential zone districts, you can't have an accessory structure that has kitchen or sanitary facilities. So this is for properties that permit multifamily land uses as a use by right. So they could build an apartment building if they chose to, but if they instead wanted to keep a historic building or wanted to build new cottages, they could.
And they'd still be subject to all the same setbacks that we already have when people want to build. Because I don't know if you call it ADU, but we do allow second homes to be built on the same residential single family lot, as long as it complies with all the other requirements, or no?
Thank
I
you.
thought that was still in place.
No, thank you for the opportunity to clarify. So that would require a re-subdivision of a lot. So if this was a single family zone district, you could only have one dwelling unit on one lot. So if somebody wanted to build a second home on that lot, they would have to re-subdivide it.
So this allows a second home to be built on the lot? with
No,
No common wall?
no. So that would be so in single family zone districts, you wouldn't be permitted to build more than one dwelling unit. If you're zoned to have more than one dwelling unit, then this would come into play. So you could tear down a single family home now and build a duplex, but this would allow you to instead detach those two units when they could have been attached, but you already had the right to build a duplex essentially.
So this applies to general residential, right?
That's correct. So we
Okay.
did not change the allowance for duplexes or multifamily in those districts.
I'm having trouble with my packet. Do you happen to know? This says there's a total of 1,156 pages for today. Do you happen to know which page your presentation is on? Because I keep scrolling and scrolling. I'm having trouble finding it.
I will need to pull up the specific page number.
Julie, it's about 900.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah.
Judith?
Thank you. Hannah, I kind of interpreted this provision, the 18.04.3.5 to allow for the building of tiny homes on a lot. Does this encompass that? If it's zoned for that, you could have a lot that you would build several small detached homes.
Yes, as long as they were a for rent product. And they would have to be attached to a permanent foundation. They could not be on their trailers and they would have to have utilities to them.
Okay, thank you. That
Mhm.
clarifies it for me.
Thank you. Anything else for the moment? Okay, Hannah?
Great. Next slide. So this is just a continuation of some of the adjustments we made in chapter 4. We removed the total number of housing units that was applicable in 2013. That changes every year. So we, again, just clean up. We clarified the owner occupancy requirement for short-term rentals, and essentially that change said that if you had 2 structures on your property, you could reside in one of those structures and rent out the other, as long as you had the appropriate approvals and things like that. It just read that you had to literally live in the same structure, but as long as you reside on the lot, that was our intent. We also updated to reflect the changes that I described in the land use table about dual operation marijuana uses. So we struck 2 sections, one being for medical solely, the other being for retail solely, and we just kept the dual operation. We removed contradictory oh, okay, sorry. I'm looking at, I found an error in my staff report, or not an error, but I had missed something that's up here. So we removed some contradictory language related to pre-existing wireless facilities. This is something that we discussed with our city attorney. The FCC regulates a lot. And so we just had 2 points where they were right next to each other, but they contradicted each other. So we struck half of one of those requirements so that, again, the intent was the same. We're just removing some contradiction. The last is we reworked requirements for home occupations. So this came out of the city council adoption hearings. Essentially, we are allowing home occupations permitted by right as long as there are no exterior impacts. So that being smoke, dust, glare, noise, vibration, and there's a couple others. And we further prohibit some land uses from ever being a home occupation, that being like auto repair, any type of auto body repair, and anything that could potentially have those impacts. So instead of listing all the potential permitted home occupations, we just cleaned it up and said, as long as you meet these criteria, you're fine. If you don't, you can't have a home occupation here. Next slide. So this is our subdivision section. Our new subdivision code seems to be working really well, and we don't have any proposed changes to this chapter. Next slide. Chapter 6. This is our application procedures section. So if you remember the procedures table, I still love it. It's great. We just missed a couple of X's in those boxes. They were described further on in the application process, so they still were applicable. We just cleaned it up and added the X's in the missing boxes. We also removed the requirement for a preliminary hearing when someone is proposing a rezoning. So the City Planning Commission previously had required these preliminary hearings before the actual hearing. And that's kind of unnecessary, in my opinion. And when we discussed it with the City Planning Commission, they felt so also. So that particular section is being struck. We have clarified the major and minor temporary use permit applications without changing the intent. And we are proposing a 1-year cap for how long a major temporary use permit can be approved for. It doesn't prohibit somebody from reapplying, but it just gives us an opportunity to reassess at the 1-year mark. Let's see. We did make some minor grammatical edits and clarified the development agreements are not approved by the City Council. Development agreements are after a project has gone through all the approvals. So we have already gone through the development plan, we've gone through our plat, and their plat has been recorded and they're starting to, they're shovel ready. A development agreement is a way for us to make sure that public improvements like curb, gutter, sidewalk are done within a certain period of time of them starting or finishing work. And so it's just a minor technical thing that we handle administratively. It just got written into the new code that city council has to approve those. So we adjusted that. We also removed the requirement for a minor site plan when a property is proposed to convert from one permitted commercial land use to another, as long as all other code sections are met. So a good example is downtown. If an art gallery wants to change to a restaurant, that's great. You just need your building permits and you can have at it. That was our intent, but it just got written in a little bit weird. So again, we clarified. Next slide. We reorganized and restructured the minor and major development plan sections without changing any intent. And we also removed a section about good cause for when a development plan expires and they want to extend the approval. We just moved that to the definition section. We renamed the waiver application to subdivision waiver. There was just some confusion happening between the term variance and waiver. They are two different things. So we just wanted to clarify waiver is for the subdivision section. It's a subdivision waiver, which is actually what it was called prior to the LUDC. We also asked our city attorney to review our waiver of replat section. Again, the intent has stayed the same, but they did have some clarifying comments, and so we incorporated those. And last, so we did add a new section about vested rights. So vested rights is something that is actually required by the state. We did put the absolute minimum into the LUDC, but it had a lot of room for improvement. And so our city attorney helped write that section. Basically, it creates a point in time in which a developer has a vested right to build what we approve. So informally, we know when that is, but this just formally states when that is. And again, it's required by state law, and they helped, or the attorney helped draft that section. Next slide. We did add a couple of definitions and altered just a couple of definitions. We already talked about a couple of these. We added a definition for inflatable displays for a mural sign. We also added definitions for attached and detached structures. We did get a couple of questions where somebody wanted to build something that was quote unquote attached, but they wanted to attach it just by a breezeway. And that kind of defeats the intent of what we were going for. So we created those definitions so we had something formal to point to. We added that definition for good cause. It stayed the same. We just moved it. And we added a definition for site-specific development plan that is tied to the new vested rights section. We altered two definitions, one being for development. All we changed was we struck conversion from the term development, because development triggers all the requirements, most of the requirements of the LUDC. So adding landscaping, adding being solar ready, things of that nature. But when you're just converting from one permitted land use to another, that's not really development unless you're wanting to build an addition, in which case all of that does apply, or completely scrape and rebuild. And again, we altered the definition for vested rights because we did hit the state minimum, but we expanded it. And I know that was very dry, but that is all the edits that I have.
Great, thank you. Mr. Shada?
Real quick, so none of this has been codified, right?
Not at this time. No, these are proposed changes.
Okay, no. I mean, the original one, because I went out and looked and it looks like 18.03 is not out in the city code book.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up, Councilor Shada. So we are reviewing the proof of what that would look like out in the on Unicode. So that'll be up pretty soon.
Okay. Then several things back to your modification suggestions to chapter 1803. Okay, the signing thing. It really seems like to me that given that we've got this plethora of big, huge trash bins, okay, porta potties, all right, recycling bins, there's huge advertising, okay, on these things, all right. Soda Springs Park is a great example. I mean, these trash companies have got nearly, 9 cubic feet on each one of these trash containers with their name, okay. I think we need to have some regulation on that. So I think that's one. I think eventually we're going to have to kind of realize that composting bins, but this also, I don't think we have any in town right now. Not a lot of them that I can think of. I think there are actually some composting bins down at the chamber. Okay. But so I would suggest that we consider some kind of regulations on this commercial signage that people are putting on these big bins and trash bins and whatnot, so that people do not have to live across the street from all this advertising on the street, or if it's on private property and it's displaying out. I realize that we've been real lax about enforcing our code that says that trash bins and things need to be enclosures. Okay, that's in our code, but it doesn't look like we're doing any enforcing of that. And it seems like to me, this also ought to apply to kind of this plethora of porta potties that keep showing up all over the place in terms of lots of advertising for these companies, and they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of the ads. I mean, these companies are getting smart that, you put a trash container in an area. I think this also needs to apply to utility boxes. All right. CenturyLink, okay, I noticed down in Coral Springs is putting in a whole bunch of new utility pedestals and big, huge advertising with their name and whatnot. In fact, it's sometimes the entire side of these utility boxes. It just seems like to me, these are things that we ought to kind of get a hold of in terms of before people come back and go, well, this was kind of an existing use kind of thing or something like that. People kind of sneaking back in and we end up with all of this ugliness. I don't know what other people in council think about this.
Other comments, council? Nancy?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'd like to approve this as it's been introduced tonight, with the exception of removing the word preliminary from the mural section. I think Mr. Shader brings up some good points, but I would like to have the opportunity to have staff go back and take a look at that, and maybe on the 6-month review or earlier than that. But I don't want to make a decision on that tonight till we hear the pros and cons, or if there are any reasons why that may not work or that it may work. So.
Well, this is going to have to be a first and second reading because this is a whole code change. So.
I guess I would kind of be aligned with the Mayor Pro Tem's position. I think what we have now is it's taken a lot of work. It's pretty complete. It's cohesive. I would be inclined to go ahead and pass this. And then, John, I think you bring up some good points about things that are, frankly, visually offensive, and we could look at it more closely and then go and amend this. It's city code. It can be really amended anytime in the future. Our intent was to have going back, several years ago when we started this whole process, it was to unify and clean up the code, organize things so it was more user friendly and less contradictory and so forth. So I see a lot of value in keeping this functional, making it better actually for now. And then, I'm not saying it couldn't be better. You've got some good points there, but I'd like to defer that and take that a little bit more methodically in the future.
Mayor, just to be clear, this is first reading right now, just so.
Right. I'm just.
I just want to make sure we were clear there aren't going to be two more unless
Okay.
you want to more.
Right, okay, that's a good point,
And
Jeff.
I have a procedural clarification. I'm fairly new to this organization, so I'm reading your code and it looks to me as if a change to the zoning code requires a 15-day advance notice on the legal notice, which means your second reading would be October 17th.
Okay, thank you for catching that. That's a
I-
little bit
I-
unusual, I think.
Wanted clarification from legal that I'm on the right track there.
I do not have the code memorized, but if that's what it says, I'm sure that's right.
I'm looking at chapter 18.5 where it talks about the amendment process.
Well, here's my concern is 18.5, if you're looking at the one online, that's not chapter 18.5 because that's
Okay.
an old code. So I don't know, Hannah, if you know, but I can take a look real quick because
It refers back to ordinance passed in 2019. So if there's been something recent,
Yeah,
more
well,
recent than that.
yeah, what we're changing now is the new code, which is not codified online other than in a
Okay.
PDF. So I need to take a peek. How about this? How about we take a look at it? I'll take a look at it while we're continuing our
Okay.
business and we'll make sure we do the timing right. So
Okay.
thanks for pointing that out.
Hey, do we have any more? Julie?
I'd like to move to approve the code amendments that have been presented, subject to that one word change, which wasn't preliminary. it was
Primarily.
Primarily, as presented.
Thank you. Do we have a
I'll second.
seconded by Mayor Pro Tem? Okay, any further discussion, council? If not, let's go ahead and vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hannah. And please extend our appreciation to your staff for all the work they've done. Alan, let Planning Commission know that we appreciate your work and your input on that. And Denise, thanks for your effort. And for anybody who's not in planning who was involved in this, send our thanks. It took 25 years to get here. Okay, Nancy.
Yeah, and I obviously like that outcome, but I do think it would be of value to look at the options for all the advertising on dumpsters, porta potties, et cetera, just to see what options are out there for us in that regard.
Can we put that on the agenda?
Yeah, I have no objection to that. There's a question about the staff right now is pretty well focused on the budget. So Denise, I'll look to you for a little advice on that or input.
Mayor, I'm going to request that we wait till after the first of the year and look at that. As you can imagine, we're working on budgets and other things. And so if we could put that out for 2024, that would be great.
I would certainly be willing to put it off past the budget. Is council okay for now, put it to the?
Well, this is a
Proceed.
planning issue. How much is the planning department involved in the budget process?
A lot. Every department takes their energy and time to make sure that it's done and that we have it. Plus, I think this will have to go to Planning Commission for first readings and have them look at it. So maybe Hannah can go talk to Planning Commission, see what's on their schedule, and then come back with a plan accordingly.
Does that seem reasonable, council? Okay, I think that's the course of action we'll do then. So Hannah, if you could figure something out and then let us know when you might be able to bring that back. Okay. Okay. I believe the vote was unanimous. Is that correct? Yeah, that was unanimous. Okay. Great. Okay, well, that takes us to council correspondence. Anybody have anything? Judith?
I just had a question about the 36 shuttle. Ever since we had that on the agenda item, with the exception of the Ascent Marathon, we've seen the smaller Mountain Metro bus, the 12-seater that is not labeled 36. So there's been tremendous amount of confusion. And also it says clearly on the door that a fee is required. So I've seen that small shuttle pretty much every day with the exception of the Ascent race. And I'm just wondering what the status of that was.
Let me look into that. I know they were, at one point, they told me they were testing out the small one. But I didn't know they were continuing to run that. So I'd have to look into that.
Yeah, it's been almost every day. And again, of course, I always ask the question, does this affect our contract in any way? Because we have paid for the larger bus for this budget season. So if you could look into that and get back to us, the smaller bus was running today.
Okay, thank you. I'll look into that.
Thank you.
Okay. Michelle, do you have anything? Okay. Nancy? John?
Yes, I'd like to request that we get our parkland up on Higginbotham Flats. Schedule 74-052-02016 zoned properly to park. I think we are opening ourselves up to problems up there, given that that's not zoned properly. Okay, I think the property owner up there thinks that they can drive across that property and use that. I think we've had quite a bit of construction traffic that's now due to that new cell phone tower that's kind of pounded down that as well. And I just think that was the intent, that when we bought that, that was park dedication. I think we just need to clean that up and get that rezoned properly. So that's 74-052-021-2016. Sorry, it's on Topeka Road. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a formal address up there, but I can send that if somebody's confused about my muddling through these numbers. Thank you.
Natalie?
Are we meeting on the 26th?
No, I was going to announce that we will not have a meeting next week.
Okay, thank you.
Julie? Anything? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, as I just said, we will not have a meeting next week. It's fourth Tuesday. It would be a work session normally, but staff is getting things tidied up and whatnot, working hard on the budget. So I think we're going to give them the opportunity to work on the budget, and there's really nothing too pressing for council, I think. I will be gone the following week, October 3rd, so Nancy will be in charge. I did want to mention, I had several people mention to me they really liked how the Pikes Peak Marathon had been run. And I got an email first thing yesterday morning from Ron, the executive director for the marathon, and he was very complimentary of city staff. He said just really everything went really smoothly. He especially called out Megan Weiss for her cooperation, and he said the whole city city staff was outstanding. He's done this for a number of years, and he said this was about the smoothest it's ever gone. And he did make a plug that in 2 years, this will be the 70th anniversary of the nation's oldest continuous marathon. So I guess start thinking about wearing your party hats in a couple of years. They're going to add a little extra something to it. See, that's all I've got. Denise or Roy?
Just finishing striping, or we finished striping on CPR Lower Crystal Park Road. Sadly, someone purposely, I think, rode over the center line. So there's a little bit of a paint outside the line, but otherwise it's looking good. And so it's a street diet. It's going to give a little more room to pedestrian bikes. We started on Ruxton, should be finished by tomorrow. We're also doing a crosswalk across Winter Street there because it's a hazard area. And then the public services team went and attended a snow and ice plowing program with Colorado Springs last week. So we did training with them, practiced best procedures for plowing, truck maneuvering. And so it was a good collaboration with Colorado Springs on snow plowing. So proud of the folks getting that done, and they feel more confident going into the fall season. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Denise?
Yeah, just a couple of things I want to mention is October 7th is Creek Week cleanup. So we will be doing that from 9 to noon. Encourage everybody to sign up for that. October 11th is the blood drive, and we're always short on blood supplies. So I encourage everybody to sign up for that also. Last week I had coffee with the city administrator, and I had, I think, 9 people show up. And it was totally about staff and the great work that staff is doing. They said that they really seen an improvement in the downtown cleanup. And I really take that to the staff and the seasonal staff that we added over the summer with trash cleanup and those things. So it was a great coffee with the city administrator, and I appreciate everybody that showed up. And we are continuing to do budgets, trying to prepare for those and get them ready and to prepare for you to give to you the budget along with a comprehensive SIP program that we'll be preparing and presenting this year. I do want to mention that's October 14th, and the public, of course, is invited to attend.
Okay, thank you. And something I forgot to mention is Sunday, October the 8th will be Indigenous Peoples' Day. There'll be a ceremony in Mansions Park at 11:30, followed by a potluck in here. And Lynn Harwell is doing the cooking for the main, basically it's a stew. So there'll be a real centerpiece to the meal. So that should be fun. Okay. I'm sorry, Judith.
I just wanted to thank you for reminding me, Mayor. I also will not be here Tuesday, October 3rd. I'll be attending the Colorado Open Space Alliance Conference. So there'll be two of us that will be gone.
I'll be participating virtually.
Okay, so you won't be at the
I
October
will not
3rd.
be here in person on the 3rd.
Okay, so we'll be down 3 people. You'll be here virtually?
I can participate virtually.
Okay, but Judith, you'll be gone or you'll be here virtual?
I will be gone. I will be at the
Gone,
conference.
okay. All right, so we would have 5 individuals. Well, that'll make a quorum. Okay, great. Well, we have 2 pieces of executive session work tonight. Let me go ahead and read that, and then I'll seek a motion, and we'll take a little break as we make the transition. The first item, an executive session to hold a conference with the city attorney for legal advice pursuant to section 5.1C of the Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning wireless facility application review procedures. And the second item, an executive session to consider the purchase or sale of property for a public purpose pursuant to section 5.1B of the Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning the purchase of the Manitou Avenue Chase Bank property. So I would look for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Let's vote.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break while we set up for the executive session. So let's come back here at about 5 of.